you get caught in the trap of delivering a service for the ultimate outcome being a placement fee. But if there's things within your business that are adding value to a client, well, why not charge for them? Why not find a different way to deliver them for value?
Hi there, I'm Belinda Kerr, founder of Recruitment Garage and your host of our first series of recruitment industry talks, where I'll be interviewing industry experts covering everything from LinkedIn strategies to talking terms, marketing, automation, and so much more. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show. All right, so welcome to this session, which is called Are Your Terms Working For or Against You? And I have the perfect person here with me to tell you whether that's the case or not, the lovely Martin Richardson. So let me welcome Mr. Martin Richardson. So Martin is the founder of Ready, Set, Recruit Legal. Martin has, run the legal team for Adecco, so he's worked in the recruitment industry in the legal capacity and now has his own business servicing agencies. And he's very passionate about really helping agencies have those commercial wins, making sure their businesses are protected legally, but also use terms to help negotiate and have better commercial outcomes all around for everybody, whether that's your clients, your talent, all the staff, everybody.
No, that was a fantastic summary. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And for those who don't know me, I can see most of the people I can see so far do know me, but for those of you who don't, I am Belinda Kerr. I'm the founder of Recruitment Garage. And what we're all about is helping recruitment agency owners running smaller businesses basically get your businesses to the potential you want, whether it's scaling or growing or just hitting the goals that you've set. That's what we're all about. So without, as I say, any further ado, let me kick off. We're going to jump straight in and ask some questions. So first up, Martin, I know this is a hot one for everybody. What are you finding is top of mind for agencies when it comes to terms of business in 2023?
So in a way, I've sensed in the last month, we're kind of going back towards 2020, by the way, but I'll get back to that, I'm sure. We're not going to be sitting here talking about indemnities and insurance and legal stuff, right? So we're not talking about that. So when you ask me that question, the first thing I think about is agencies are coming to me asking about other services that they may already offer or they're looking to offer. So consulting services.
Okay.
And looking to incorporate those into their business, maybe into their existing terms or into a separate set of terms. How they price that, and I'm not the pricing expert, but certainly looking at bringing in additional services, which is a bit of a trend I've found, particularly in the last probably 12 months actually. And it tells me there's demand, I guess, from clients, and maybe agencies are seeing that they're offering free value and saying, well, hang on a minute, maybe we should be charging for this. So I think it's a really important kind of point too, that you get caught in the trap of delivering a service for the ultimate outcome being a placement fee. But if there's things within your business that are adding value to a client, well, why not charge for them? Why not find a different way to deliver them for value? So more of that. It's an interesting conversation because often it's not in terms, or if it is, it's just we will charge a third, and there's not really a lot of other extrapolation of what a retained service is. So having those conversations. Do we put into separate terms again because it's a customized service? How do we price that? How do we structure that?
Actually, while Martin's gone, Growth Club, for those of you who don't know what it is, we've started a community about 2 months ago for recruitment founders, which is really a learning and growth community where we have, it's a peer group community. We do some training, etc. Well, let's kick off onto the second one then. What is the biggest mistake that you see agencies making with their terms?
I would say it's how they're. Well, there's two elements to it. One is how they're designed and how they're used. So the biggest mistake around that is often, you'll hear and I understand that clients will push agencies on rates. So say that's happening a lot. And then an agency will then negotiate around rates and confine a negotiation to a single issue around rates. And then, deal's done. And then client wants you to get going, so you send your terms. The agency sends its terms. The terms then contain the standard replacement terms, the standard payment terms. If you've got staffing in there as well, standard conversion terms. Everything's standard and presumably is built on a standard offer, like going to a hotel and getting a rack rate versus a discounted rate. So if your terms are built on your standard rate, but then you discount your rates and then issue your set of terms with everything in there, effectively you are conceding value again versus a discounted fee. So that's what I see all the time. Every time I get presented, not every time, I'm generalizing, but a lot of times I get presented with a set of terms to review, which I do a lot of, and there is no ability for an agency to design or to negotiate a package of items. So I would prefer to see that an agency has those conversations and packages in payment terms and replacement terms, periods, if at all, credits, refunds, if that's a thing, conversion fees. Anything else that's a commercial element that can have an impact on a client's willingness to push you on fees, for one. Sure, we'll drop our fee, but you don't get a replacement. Then all of a sudden we know what's important to a client as well, right? So maybe the fee isn't what they're looking for. Maybe they're willing to pay more because they actually want to get other value. So that I hope I'm making sense. But I think that packaging, and this is a negotiation thing anyway. You know, when you go onto a website to buy software, you often see the 3 offers. Now we think in threes. Humans think in threes. How many agencies have 3 offers? Even if it's a standard client comes in Thursday, we want you to start working on this role straight away. I get it, contingent role particularly, you want to get that fee in. But are you doing yourself out of value because you're agreeing to these single issue items and not actually packaging up and using your terms to negotiate through to get better, to deliver more for your agency?
Got it. Yep. So do you have some examples as to what that would look like?
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty simple. I would just use a simple, either you're doing it via a proposal or a separate document and then having terms form part of that commercial proposal, depending on how important the role is. You know, exclusive, retained, you'd be using proposals or for retained. But maybe just a cover schedule that has all the things that you like, that you can adjust, that talks back to your terms. And really great for if you've got a team, and I know a lot of you are micro businesses, but you know, it's having that ability to quickly adjust things. I don't know what Justin's coming out there, standard. I don't know what you mean there, Justin, but standard is in what I'm talking about, or standard is in that's how you do it. I'm not sure. I don't often see it. That's how terms are, but I would just use a cover sheet.
Okay, cool. All right. And so how do successful agencies position their terms to win business?
Well, firstly, they're on brand.
Okay.
Again, something you will see is I've got agencies that have great marketing, great brand, great colours, logos, whatever it is, and then they have legal documents which were written potentially by someone else or for someone else, are old and are overly legal, full of jargon, maybe 6 font. They just don't reflect the brand.
Okay.
So straight away, so maybe they don't get presented early in the process either. So you go through this process, you tell the client, you get the client to love you, the client wants to work with you, and then these terms come through which don't reflect what you've talked about or what you are. So I think that's a non-legal way for me to say, you know, I see that all the time. I kind of scratch my head because I'm the lawyer and I sometimes struggle to understand terms. So I think, well, how are you able to explain these to your clients, and when the client is using you because you're experts in what you do, that means that you're not their core business, clearly, because they're using you, just like you would use a lawyer because your core business is not being a lawyer. So that ability to make them on brand, reflect your tone and your language, but also make them clear and transparent, get rid of the stuff you don't need. Don't hold on to stuff because something happened once 10 years ago, so I'm going to put that in my terms. Which, by the way, segue, we'll probably come back to client terms. But if you think about client contracts, I call client contracts every bad experience a client has ever had with a recruiter put into a contract. Something happened once, we never want that to happen again, it goes into a contract. If your terms have things like that, then maybe it's time to kind of go, you know what, is this really a huge risk for us?
Do you think so what is the way to fix that? Is it to go back and start again and rebuild your terms, or what's the answer to that?
Potentially, yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe the first thing is just do an audit on them and think, are they still reflecting how we're doing our business? Have we got to a point where this stuff, you know, we know this stuff isn't as important? Can I explain it? Can you get your team? Maybe you go through and I know you guys are smaller potentially, but you know, sit around a meeting room and say, tell me what this clause means, and get you to explain to each other what the clauses mean. If you can't explain and understand your terms in a way that you can explain in 10 seconds to a client, then maybe that's an audit point to say maybe we need to work on some of our language.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would do, if you're reasonably happy with your terms, but there are some things in there, look, get them reviewed. Maybe build an FAQ though. Maybe start building an FAQ within your intranet or whatever you use. You know, within your, you know, we've got lots of tech. within your CRM, where if you're getting frequent questions, your team can share them, or you can have answers ready to go.
Right.
Because clients just don't understand them, and we assume that people understand our terms. I've got terms that I use. I can't assume that everyone understands what my terms say.
Yeah, and so when you're saying keep it simple, so what I worry about then is missing things out.
Yep.
How do you find that balance between keeping it simple and having everything in there that you need?
Well, the balance is it's risk management. It's consequence versus likelihood, meaning how likely is this to happen, and if it does, what are the consequences?
Right.
So you wouldn't take your fees out because the likelihood of you having a dispute over fees is pretty high because you've got nothing to point to, and the consequences of that are not getting paid. Maybe you've got something in your terms around, what was one I was looking at the other day that comes up all the time in terms. In your replacement terms, if we replace the candidate and you re-engage the original candidate within 12 months, you will pay another fee. Okay. How often does that happen? How do you find out? Is that in your term? I see that in all the terms, but no one can actually tell me whether it's ever happened. It may have happened to you, but that's an example you might go, well, does it need to be in there? What the consequence of that is, we may miss out of a fee. The likelihood is probably pretty low, but also the consequence has to be tempered by the fact, will you ever find out in your business?
My experience of that, and it'd be interesting to see what the guys in the chat say, was you'd have that in your clause, and then you'd be on LinkedIn, at some point, and you'd see that person working at that company and like, oh, okay, they moved there within the 12 months. And then it becomes really icky because you got to go back and chase it. And then they've been placed by somebody else who's also had the candidate. It definitely happened to me.
Yeah. The likelihood, yes, it happened. The consequence of that is you went, oh, well, what do I do about it? So Lorraine, I am saying keep it simple. You don't have to think that they need to be overly legal, I guess is what I'm saying. But yes, it's important through an audit to work out what is important to you and making sure they are in there clearly. You don't want to miss stuff. But I also have agencies say to me, I wish I could get this onto one page. Still, I can put it on one page for you. But is that actually the issue? Or is it the issue that you are not prepared to be or not able to have the conversations with your client around what your terms say because you're not confident or comfortable with them? Not saying so.
No, so much. I was just thinking as you're talking, and one of the things, like you say, we're changing, things are changing all the time, and sometimes you add something. What I worry about, because sometimes people will send me their terms to read. Now, I'm obviously not a lawyer, but I guess it's just a second pair of eyeballs. And sometimes I'll pick up things, and although I'll think that conflicts with that, or we've said that there's connection pieces missing. Do you find that a lot when you are reviewing terms?
Yeah, they've been Frankenstein,
yes.
So they've come from somewhere, or they've started out and the business has gone in a different direction. We're going contracting and staffing is a classic example where it's bolted onto a set of perm terms, completely different service, needs separate terms, and is often bolted on, and the terms don't talk to each other. There's different terminology. Someone's gone in and decided, I call them a contractor, so I'm going to use the word contractor over here, and then over here they're a temp, and up here they're something else. So you see that a lot, and terms don't work. So that's a hygiene issue around terms and making sure they're still legally binding, but still make sure they're a contract.
What are the things that the things that we absolutely should have in the terms? So, like, one would obviously be the fees. One would be the guarantee.
This is what I get paid. This is when I get paid. This is what triggers me getting paid. As in, we'll talk about perm. If I introduce a candidate, so there's a candidate introduction, there's a candidate exclusivity, there's an event which triggers a placement fee. This is my fee, and this is when you have to pay it by. So it's a process. I would just map the key requirements to your process from start to, in a basic sense. And there's lots of permutations around that. If it's a retained, my requirements for retained are you pay me an upfront fee before I do anything. I receive that money before I do anything. And the next step is the next milestone. So the requirements are, what's your delivery from getting the brief to delivering a successful placement in perm? So, it's a hard question to answer because I don't know how every agency operates. But I would think of it very simply as, if I didn't have a contract and it was verbal, so there was no paper, there was no pen, there was no typing, there was no anything, how would I explain it to my client so they know that what I do leads to this.
Cool. Is there a basic template to follow?
I don't know. Well,
I think the answer would be no to that one, wouldn't it?
yeah, I think a lot of the reason I'm kind of smiling here, I don't deal in templates. People think lawyers deal in templates. People think there's a template for everything. There isn't a template for everything, because if you start with a template, what happens is you'll be frustrated with it and you'll amend it, and you'll end up back in this cycle of, I have a
You'll be doing a Frankenstein
business. Yeah. So
okay.
I think the template is, what do I do and how do I expect to get paid?
Okay, cool. All right. So what changes are you seeing, Martin, in standard clauses like replacements and temp to perm conversations?
We'll start with replacements.
Okay.
I really don't like replacement terms. I get it. Everyone does it. I just kind of look at it. So I'm going to start here. I look at replacements, and I'm yet to find an example of any other industry that offers a warranty for a decision they don't make and a workplace they don't control. That's where I would start with my replacements. And everyone does it. Someone at one point in time, Belinda, back in whenever, it was a great idea. It was a competitive advantage. At some point, someone said, this is a great idea, and then everyone does it.
Became the norm, yeah.
Became the norm, and now clients expect it. But what I am seeing around it is agencies are kind of thinking, well, is it? Is this really what I want? So should I be limiting not only the period, should I be limiting the scope? So you often see resignation is covered by replacement terms. Do I want resignation? Resignation is even further away from a termination event by a client. Now, it's even further away from your control. It's not even within the client's control unless, the client has forced that person through conduct or whatever. So how can I confine my terms, my replacement terms? Moving away, this is me encouraging my clients strongly to not use the word guarantee, because guarantee has legal connotations. It's a guarantee, and you can't guarantee. I don't believe an agency is guaranteeing anything. But then the industry has created this mindset in clients that it's all risk. Yeah, there's no risk effectively because you're guaranteeing it. You're not actually guaranteeing anything. So I would encourage you to remove guarantee from your language. It's really a separate obligation or a separate incentive that you are offering, but you still have delivered a service and you are still entitled to a fee for that service.
And so are you seeing people doing this already? It is happening. Okay.
I'm seeing replacements taken out. I was talking to someone the other day, and I remarked to an agency, I said, they sent me, I do health checks of documents, and I said, you don't actually have replacement terms in your TOBs. And the response was, should we? It's like, no, it was good, right? They don't have it. And they obviously hadn't had any issues because they hadn't put it in there.
That's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because it's almost like in the vernacular of what we do. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, not there. So confining the scope, and then credits. I know no one does refunds. Refunds are automatically, no one can do that, and I understand that. But so if we talk about credits, having tiered credits, so that's something. I don't know if anyone's doing that. So if you've got a 3-month replacement period, then the credit discounts depending on when the person exits the business. So in the first 4 weeks, it might be 100%. Weeks 5 to 8, it might be 75, whatever it is. Basically saying if you're going to jettison the person on the last day of the 3-month period, you're not getting 100% credit because the credit's worth more at the beginning than it is 3 months later because you've had that time to make that decision. So that's another way of doing it. I have seen a couple of refunds. I've seen a couple of agencies say, I've had this conversation. So my last point on this, Belinda, would be, what's the data? I talked about risk, likelihood, and consequence. And temp to perm conversions are the same with discounts. What's the data on these things happening? If replacements are a big issue for you, then you're going to have a different view than someone that has one every 2 years. And maybe it takes more effort to do a replacement than it does to offer something else.
Interesting.
What is the data around how often it happens and how long it takes you, depending on your industry? I mean, I've had one particular client really niche, and we had that conversation. I said, well, what such a niche area, and it was so much work to find the first candidate, let alone a replacement, that the agency went, yeah, you're right. It's too much effort to put back onto consultants. We may as well just find a way to refund 50% or something. So that's where they went. They just decided to drop it.
It was actually Rec to Rec that we used to use once, and she had a clause whereby they only offered a guaranteed. I'm a bit nervous using that word now after what you said. But her guarantee was only valid if they were really involved, quite heavily involved in an onboarding process. That was part of their thing.
Yep, that's great. Yeah, I've seen that. They have, I had one client a few years ago where they had a 90-day onboarding program or something. They had some kind of coaching and support where, if the client didn't buy into that process, it might have been the same client. If they didn't buy into that process, the replacement didn't apply. And that's what a great idea, actually, when you mention it, of how to mitigate your risk of a candidate falling out because they've been supported through you.
And it's also a really good opportunity to embed yourself in that client too, like to give them more value and to be in front of them more to pick up what else is in there. The sad thing is about working in Australia is our terms are pretty much the lowest in the world. You guys in the States, in North America, have got much better fees. Oh, my screen's gone blank. Much better fees than we do. And the UK, Europe is higher as well. We just seem to have the bottom of the barrel here in Australia.
Yeah, all right. I didn't realise that. And just so conversions, I know I'm conscious of time. So conversions, it's a similar thing that I'm seeing. I would say because clients are pushing it, often client terms, contracts, depending on the industry, but often IT, engineering, tech, white collar, they have these, free temp to perms after 12 months or even after less time, banks and so on. So, and you can get caught up in those as an agency, I feel. And again, what's do contractors, if we call them contractors, our temps, do they actually want to convert? So how often is it happening? So is this, is that worth fighting over? Within your own terms, I wouldn't be offering discounts because it's a concession right up. Again, it's something I would keep in my negotiation kit bag because why would you offer something the client hasn't yet asked for?
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. I think a lot of that comes down to confidence too, doesn't it? Really standing behind your own confidence. What word would you use instead of guarantee?
I just call it replacement terms.
Okay.
A replacement policy. It's something like that. Yeah.
So policy. Well, that'll scare them.
Yeah. And you can use guarantee. Like, don't be scared about that. I just think it creates, and it's out there, right? Everyone's using it, but I just think it creates not only a legal thing. I think it just creates this expectation.
It's one of those things too, isn't it? Because it just becomes such a habit that we all call it that. You don't think about it until somebody says, well, why do you do it that way? It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's time to rethink what we are calling it. That's a good point. What do I do when a client demands that I sign their terms, not ours?
Yeah, I get this a lot. And I know this is a massive tension, massive friction point. So this is one of my favorite go-tos. I don't have a tactic. I'm not a ninja tactical. I don't have a tactic that's a ninja tactic to get through this question. My response to that would be, have you read it before you've signed it? So it's one thing for them to say everyone else has signed it and then you sign it. But is it good business? Just because everyone else has signed it doesn't mean that they've read it. Doesn't mean that they're offering what you're offering. I think Sophie Robertson, some of you may know. I mean, we talk about value and she says compared to what, and I like that, compared to what. So everyone else has signed it, but how do I compare to them? But I think it's incumbent upon you as an owner, if you're an owner or a manager with staff or whatever, you've got an enterprise here that you are running. It's incumbent upon you to understand what it is that you're signing up to. So they may say everyone else has signed it, but do you understand what they're asking you to sign? And I will tell you that my experience of reviewing too many client contracts is they are not fit for recruitment. They're not designed for recruitment. It's a really unique model. And it's these terms, not by design, often by default, do not reflect your service. By design, they're written by lawyers who will push a lot of risk onto you. So you think about where a client contract comes from. It may have come 5 years ago, 10 years ago from an external law firm or an internal legal, but probably external. It's gone into procurement. It sits there and it gets rolled out. The person who wrote it is a lawyer who writes certain clauses around insurance that don't reflect what's happening in the insurance market, which is changing every year, and particularly at the moment with premiums and the insurance is a for-profit industry, so they change all the time. So you've got contracts written which don't reflect insurance in the market that you hold. They don't reflect your business, and they push a lot of risk too. So, sign it. but I would say, counsel you to say, only sign it if you actually understand what it is you're signing up for. And there'll be margin killers in there. What do the schedules say around your fees? What's buried in there? Can you pass, are there fixed prices for a period of 3 years? There's all those sort of things which, we can focus on catastrophe, but what about what I call the margin killers that are built into these contracts that can cost you time reporting and all the KPIs and all these other things that are in there that you can work out, you can read it. You don't need a lawyer to tell you those things. You can hopefully read those and say, well, is this actually good business?
Yeah. And sometimes you can, I found, not always, but sometimes you can, pushback's probably not the right word, but say, like I had quite big PSLs that we were on, and, we weren't a big business. And often, like you mentioned, the insurance that they expect you to have.
Yeah.
Like for me as a business to get the insurance that they were just had as a standard in their terms didn't make any sense. So I spoke to the gentleman that was doing it. And he said, oh yeah, Belinda, you don't need that. We'll change it. So sometimes you can just have a conversation. And I think if it doesn't practically make sense, you might find that they will, depending on the company, they may change some of those things for you.
Yeah.
Probably not the margins.
No, probably not your margins, but and you make a really good point there, which is the person you're dealing with. And I often say this, one of limiting beliefs for recruiters and business owners anyway, I say limiting, but one of the beliefs is I'm not an expert in this stuff. And confidence, right? You mentioned confidence. Well, the person you're dealing with is also not an expert. They're not expert in your service. That's why they're using you. So you need, what is the value? Its value is what they perceive from previous experience. But also they're not a legal expert either. So if you have just a little bit of prep around this stuff and the ability to go back and say, well, hey, this contract says, we're talking about staffing, which is the classic one. This contract says that what our workers do, what we do, is by extension what the workers do on site for you under your direction and control and supervision. We put in a white collar person and they're an engineer and they design a bridge and the bridge falls over. Or there's a case in WA at the moment where a $3 million piece of equipment has been written off by a labour hire worker, I understand.
Ouch.
And guess who the client's coming after? The insurers, by the way, not the client, because things flow up to insurance really quickly and then it's out of your control. Because the contract probably says that you're responsible for property damage. You're not even there. And if it's the client's employee, their business and undertaking, they wouldn't sue their own employee for that damage. They might be put through a performance and misconduct or whatever, but their remedy is, well, effectively terminating the person. So as an agency, you're their banker because you're payrolling. You're their employer because you're taking on the employment risk. And are you also their insurer? Is that really what your nature of your business is? So they're all hidden into these contracts. You go back to a client and you say that to the client who's not a legal expert who wants to do business with you because they love you and they want you to come on board. Hey, we're just a bit concerned. Our insurer has said these insurance requirements are beyond our cover. Hey, we're a little bit concerned that these indemnities are kind of blurring the lines between what we can actually control. And I was like, okay.
So the lesson is not to whether or not to sign it, but to look deeply into what it says.
Yep.
And then I guess anything you don't understand, clarify. And then anything like that, with the example that you just gave, to unpack those in a kind of a common day language that in a practical way to see what you can change. Yeah. Does that help, guys? Sorry, Martin. Yes.
I was just saying, the last point I would say is, okay, well, that's great, but we still have to sign it. But hey, at that point in time, you're making a fully informed decision whether you want to sign it or not. That's all I'm getting to. What are you making an informed decision about what you are signing? You can still sign it, but at least now you understand and you've told your insurer and they've said, yeah, well, you're not going to be insured for this or you'll have to pay extra premium for that. Would you rather be in that position or find out in 3 years' time that something happens and your insurance goes, you should have never signed that. We didn't give you permission to sign that.
Yeah.
Because it's outside your insurance, right? So that's it. Sign what you need. I'm not here to tell you not to sign documents. I'm just saying, do some prep work.
Buyer or seller beware in this case. Buyer beware. Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. What would you say are the 3 top legal risks that agencies need to keep on their radar?
Data, cyber. It's on everyone's radar. And I'd say agencies would be in the top. I don't know what the data is. Law firms are actually number 1 in Australia for data vulnerability, by the way, law firms, which we're seeing a lot of hacks because they hold so much client data that's sensitive. So we've had 2 massive hacks here of law firms that are dealing with government agencies, right? Recruiters, how much personal information do you hold? A lot. And so data and cybercrime would be the number 1, and it's just increasing. So if that's not on your radar, then it needs to be. cyber and crime insurance is nearly becoming a mandatory requirement in the client contracts I'm seeing. They're expecting you to hold cyber. I'll come back to that, Max, if that's okay. Understanding where your vulnerabilities are and understanding that a CRM is not a panacea. They won't come through the CRM to you. They'll come through you to your CRM. So your CRM is a third-party provider, which is going to be with AWS. They're going to be Google. They're going to have data held in secure servers. They're not coming through them. They're going to come through a phone or an email or a phishing email into your systems, and then they'll find their way into your CRM to get data. So don't think that is saving you, because they're probably not. Think of Singapore in World War II. The guns were facing to the ocean and the Japanese came through the peninsula, right? Maybe not a great analogy, but that's the point, right? They weren't prepared for that, but that's where cybercrime comes through. That law firm, the example here, so they're being blackmailed for about $50 million. They deal with the Russian hackers. That was a phone of an employee. That's how they got into the system. It's now a $50 million ransomware event. So
what do we do there, Martin, to protect ourselves?
Well, I think understand what data you're holding. And there's a whole layer to this, but understanding what data you're holding, where you intersect with personal information, how you're collecting it, how old the data is, having a plan around privacy to get rid of redundant data, understanding where you're storing it, understanding your own systems and vulnerabilities about how people can get into your system. So there's a whole layer. There's the how do I mitigate it happening? How do I deal with it if it does happen? How do I continue to run business? And who do I call? So you can't be, if you don't hold the information, the more information you hold, the more they can take. So that's the first thing. What do I actually hold? And then just understanding what your vulnerabilities are, and then looking at insurance and what insurance coverage is available, because the cybercrime insurance is probably expensive, but at the same time, if it helps you keep running your business, then it may be worth looking at.
Okay. Now, is that one or is that one and two?
So that's one.
That's one.
Credit risk, client credit risk. Would be the big risk. The market's turning. That would be the other one right now that I would say, well, are you still doing due diligence on clients' ability to pay? It's important.
So this is more than just about getting your terms signed. This is doing your own credit checks before you're dealing with companies.
If you're going to be extending a lot of credit, then and one $20,000 fee is a lot of money to anybody, of course. So I'm not expecting you to go and do Dun & Bradstreet on everyone, but just be aware that the bankruptcies in Australia, and I don't know what the other markets are like, I can have a guess. The bankruptcies are accelerating. I mean, the data they're well above 100% year on year from last year.
So maybe some incentives for some prepayment. I'll give you a little bit of a discount if you pay at least something up front.
Yes. So that would be something to think about. Just credit risk. Okay, it's been a great 3 years, but things are slowing down. And what does that mean for our clients' ability to pay for our services? Particularly because recruiters do a lot before they get paid in most cases.
It's definitely the same in North America, I know, just from speaking to the guys over there as well. So cool. Okay.
The last one, confidential information, staff moving around. If you're looking to downsize because the market's, whatever it is, what information is really important to me and is competitive, and what am I doing to protect that, either in my employment contracts, but through my policies where I hold information, making sure that people understand their obligations regarding my confidential information. Mine is in the agency's confidential information.
But this might be a bit outside your remit, but I'm just thinking about LinkedIn. So if somebody's working for you and they're connecting up, they're connecting on LinkedIn, what's the deal with that now?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think there's been a case in the UK a few years ago around this, but it's hard because, you have LinkedIn, you have accounts, right? Company, you can use agency accounts. Ultimately, it's a personal connection, so it is hard. You can build things in. It's a bit clunky, though, to build things into your employment contract around that. You can do it, but there are, the only way to deal with that is to have them staff obligated to upload contacts into your CRM. So if they connect with someone, it goes into your CRM. That way, you've got a dual record. Otherwise, you're dealing with trust issues, I trust that they won't do it, right through to sitting there on their last day, which I've heard of and seen and been on the other end of, sitting there making them log in and transfer all of them in front of them. Now, not a great way to leave it. That's pretty onerous. So, yeah, LinkedIn's a difficult one. It's a tool of business. Everyone uses it. Maybe rely on your confidential information, but also restrictions if they're reasonable to try and, reduce the ability for people to solicit clients and candidates after the fact. But yeah.
Interesting one. Okay. So that was 3, wasn't it? Now, Martin, I know you just said yourself, you're not a pricing expert, but I know you see a lot of terms, and you must see a lot of interesting structures rather.
Yeah.
And I know things are changing. So what are you seeing out there in terms of pricing, or even just different offerings that people are doing, changing things up a little bit? What are you noticing?
Yep. So the RPO is a good example. We've talked about that. We were talking just before we came on, weren't we? I had this one the other day. I thought, that's a really cool idea. It turned out I'd interpreted their cool idea as my own cool idea. It wasn't what they meant. And that was, which I thought was a good idea. So it was around candidate exclusivity. So standard terms will say, we introduce a candidate, we own them for X months, usually 12 months. If you employ them during that period, we get a fee. And I thought this was saying, effectively, we will present candidates for the role, and you employ someone or you don't. Say you employ someone and we get a placement fee. Then if someone else out of that process is employed, then instead of it being a full fee, it's a finder's fee effectively. So it's basically, it's the same concept, but it's taking the friction again out of candidate ownership, because that seems to be a friction point. And I've said that a few times. So where terms set up these our way or the highway, clients, it can send a message to a client. So I thought that idea of softening exclusivity for a lower fee effectively, I might not explain that very well, but I thought it was a cool idea. Instead of going 12 months, you must pay a fee. It was, hey, if someone else comes in out of that process, there'll be a fee, but it'll be a lower fee. Another one, this kind of feeds into retainer. So I think retainer is this third approach. And I had 2 within 2 weeks, agencies ringing me saying, we're not getting our retainer fees paid. And it kind of struck me as odd. I thought the whole point of a retainer was getting paid at least a third before you do anything. And both these agencies had just done a retained as if it was a contingent, right? Send an invoice for a third, presented a shortlist, send an invoice for a third, and the client says, I'm cancelling the process. Oh, you owe me 66% of the fee. Well, you should have collected those fees, So I think understanding that from a retainer perspective, understanding the pricing structure. So a little bit of a segue.
That's dangerous, isn't it? I've never heard of that happening.
No, and that was just that treating everything and treating exclusive, which is that in between, as a contingent. So anyway, where I was going with that was upstream. So I saw this really cool model. I'm not going to say too much, but the focus is on what the client is capable of doing themselves in the recruitment process, i.e. interviewing, offering, and then building the service around the upstream, finding the candidates, which the agency is good at. So it's effectively dividing the service and then pricing or charging based on how many candidates meet the brief. So it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing bulk recruitment, this would be ideal, because you could set your payment terms or your fees around success of how many. So you could agree with the client, we're going to put 100 people who meet the criteria based on whatever into the process. And our KPI, if you offer 25% of them jobs, we get the fee, or whatever it is, right? We get a fee for every one of those. So we're basically a funnel. We find the candidates and we'll funnel them into your process. And then whatever comes out of that process as job offers, we then get paid on. So you take responsibility for, the client takes responsibility for interviewing and so on. But obviously the number that come through that upstream process is a lot lower than the number that go in. So it might not be working for everyone. But what I like it as a principle is where, and this is where retain fits in, what are we good at, and what is the client engaging us for, and what can the client take on? And so what can we give to the client and say that's their responsibility, and our fee will look a bit different. Maybe that could be the RPO model as well, right?
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? And so are you talking more there around a bespoke model, or are you thinking that, like you were talking about the 3 different, you might have 3 different offerings?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Could be either.
Yeah. And even it could be. And what I guess more broadly, what I liked about it is this agency, very entrepreneurial owner, sat back and went, well, what am I good at? What is it that clients pay me for? And he worked out what I'm really good at. And then he worked out what he wasn't interested in doing, by the way. That was where he was coming from. I'm not really interested in interviewing 100 people. Maybe he was doing a first interview, it was tech roles and stuff, whatever. But it was more that this is what I'm good at and this is where the value is in the process. So, yeah, I just thought that was a good
Interesting.
way of stepping back from the traditional transactional nature, which clients kind of price you on, by the way, don't they? They don't necessarily
Yeah.
price you. Like I get priced on legal documents, not on these conversations.
It's interesting, but I think that's going to change more because it is, people are coming up with different, like the company you just mentioned, people are coming up with different solutions. And, let's face it, the contingent model's been broken for a long time.
Yeah.
People are coming up with new and innovative ways, and they're working with companies in a more entrepreneurial kind of way, then that's a good thing. Heard of agencies breaking their perm placement fee into monthly installments. It might be $35K, but it's payable over 12 months. Do you see that much?
So there's third-party providers that offer this payment plans. So, they'll offer a financial. So I've seen the finance solution where the agency gets paid up front. You get paid whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make this up. Say it's 85% up front. And then they collect the money.
Like factoring.
Factoring. It's factoring basically, but with some slight different things. But yeah, that kind of upfront. You can do this. In fact, that reminds me, and I don't want to give away too much IP of clients, but they actually looked at this installment in lieu of a replacement. So the installments were over the replacement. So instead of a replacement over 6 months, it was installments over 6 months. So if it fell out, then you wouldn't pay any more fee. But there was no. Does that make sense? So that was a third at month day 1, month 3, month 6. 3 payments, a third. So you pay the third on day 1, or maybe you pay 50% on day 1 when they start. Fees $20,000, you pay 10. In 3 months' time, if the candidate's still there, you pay another 25%. If they're not there, you don't pay anymore. If they're still there at the 6 months, you've paid the balance of the fee. Again, it'll be role dependent. You wouldn't do this for every role, but if it's
That's interesting.
so it's just basically installments in lieu of so it works like a replacement in it. It kind of works the same. You don't pay the kind of like a credit or refund. Well, it's not really, but it's just waiving the fees. So it was just a different way of pricing it because replacements were more difficult in that market. So
I think that's interesting, and it's totally different, isn't it, to the way we traditionally think about it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in our next Growth Club expert session.